Well, there's been plenty of speculation in the past 48 hours that the Prime Minister has softened his stance on a royal commission into the Bondi terror attack. I imagine he's been shown some polling. You shouldn't need polling, though, to know the difference between right and wrong. He was at the funeral of Peter Meager today, the last of the Bondi victims to be buried, and the only one of 15 funerals that Anthony Albanese has attended. Now, for context, Peter Meager wasn't Jewish. He was at Bondi on December 14 as a freelance photographer, capturing Jewish celebrations. But perhaps mixing with those grieving the loss of a husband and friend will soften the PM's heart, and he'll finally belatedly call that royal commission. I mean, even former Greens leader Bob Brown, on the ABC no less, said today that a full investigation into Jew hatred in this country was, and I quote Bob Brown, very, very important. I can't imagine what current members of the Greens thought of that. And speaking of current members of the Green, I'd love to know what Bob Brown thinks of them. But back to our Labor MP. Will he do the right thing? Mike Kelly is a former Labor minister, ex-army officer and co-convener of Labor Friends of Israel. He's part of a growing group of senior Labor figures publicly backing a royal commission into anti-Semitism and Islamist extremism. Mike Kelly joins me now. Mike, thanks so much for coming on the program. I really do appreciate it. Calls for a royal commission, as I said, are now coming from everywhere, and yet so far Anthony Albanese has stonewalled. So I have to ask you, what's wrong with the Prime Minister?
Yeah, well, I think it's a fairly common thing, James, where governments come out of the gate on a major incident and they're narrowly focused on the immediate issues in front of them. And sometimes it's very hard to, get broader strategic thinking happening in that early phase after an incident. But what I'm hoping is that with the new information that continues to emerge, but more importantly, the just complete unison and chorus of support for an RC by every corner of Australian society in a democratic country should send the signal, hey, leadership in this situation means you also recognise that this is what the nation wants to see. But also, it's just straight logic. You've got a situation where New South Wales and Chris Minns are showing the way, but this is not a Sydney or a New South Wales problem. This is a national problem, and it requires national leadership, national action. And there's so many reasons why a Commonwealth Federal Royal Commission has to be put in place, from all of the issues that have to be compelled to be presented from the Commonwealth organisations and officers, all of the things that need to be unpacked in the way that those agencies relate to state police, all of the broader contextual issues about the ecosystem of terrorism, how this kind of hate gets incubated, and how it really is part of that disaggregated world of terrorism that we're confronting these days, which we need everybody to come to grips with and understand. The social media dimensions to it all, which is orchestrated to a great degree by foreign actors. And then, of course, the healing processes that a Royal Commission can contribute to, as it did with the Veterans Royal Commission. So that broader understanding is what you really want a politician, a representative of your community, to be across.
Well, you mentioned it requires leadership. Just very quickly, because I want to move on to some other things, but is Anthony Albanese failing in his leadership of the country right now?
Well, we have a saying in the army that says lead, follow, or get out of the way. And at the moment, you've got the community showing where they want to go. And so in this situation, leadership actually requires you saying, well, there go my people, and I must follow them. So I'm hoping that in the trail of all of these commentaries that we have seen, and this latest document of the 32 signatories, these are all people that I have worked and served with, and they are outstanding Australians of incredibly high moral fibre and decency, but with a breadth of experience from tactical levels of dealing with terrorism and problems all the way to strategic policy making, who understand the broader context of all of this stuff. And if they're with one voice speaking out to you, you must sit up and take notice. But from the community point of view, when I was member of Eden Monaro, I had about 400 town halls, and it was critically important to me to go and hear the community, to learn its perspectives, to maybe change mine on any issue, and to take that back to the party room to caucus. That, to me, is how the democratic process should work. And hopefully the members coming back and being recalled early, if the government doesn't act before then, need to reflect what they're experiencing at the coalface and the feedback they're getting from the community.
Well, Mike Kelly, you're very well connected within the Labor movement. What are you hearing privately about the thinking of the PM, and what do you expect to happen in the next few days, if anything, on this matter?
It's a good question, James. And, in the letter that we wrote, obviously there were a large number of Labor people prepared to sign up publicly to that, and more keep joining as we go on, because we did this, as fast as we could and couldn't, bring everybody in the movement. But I've had phone calls today from, very prominent union leaders supporting the effort. I know that there are very significant former MPs, members of the party, who, because of the positions they're in, didn't want to make a public representation, but are contacting the Prime Minister and ministers privately to reflect their views, but all support the position we have taken. And so one just hopes that this continues to build. And could I also, noting the comments you made earlier in this program, 100% endorse your comments in relation to that heinous cartoon that appeared in the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah, I just could not believe it when I picked up the paper and saw that today. Just one more question on this issue before I move on to politicians making the most of the perks they get. You wrote today a great article, by the way, in the Australian newspaper, that a Royal Commission is necessary because you don't believe what we've been told, that the alleged perpetrators of the Bondi attack were lone actors. Just expand on that for me a little bit more as to what you believe and why a Royal Commission is so necessary in fleshing that out.
Well, I've obviously stayed very closely involved with the security affairs of the nation, and you keep an eye on how terrorism has been evolving. I was at the coalface of that and deployments overseas. And really, it's a silly thing to say that, they're lone actors when that's not, and perhaps we're talking about, physically helping people with weapons or physically planning the attack for them or with them and helping movements or whatever, the direct sort of input into an attack like that. But that's not how the system works these days with this disaggregated approach to terrorism. So these terrorist organisations understand you've got to avoid detection, you've got to avoid the ability of agencies to join the dots. Now, the technology is out there that helps you do that and get around those problems, but we don't have that technology available in our agencies. But basically, it means that you've got people filling different roles. So people like the hate preachers of Western Sydney who assist with the process of conditioning someone mentally so that they can look down a scope at a 10-year-old little girl running to her mother and shoot her dead. That requires a special state of mind, and there are people who play a role in creating that and enabling that to happen. Yeah. And then the question of, advice that they might get about looking for the opportunities or tips about how to find information about developing improvised explosive devices. All these things these days are done by word of mouth or other means that can't be detected technically. So nothing happens in this space where these two people are just acting out of the blue. It's been something that they have been prepped to do mentally at the very least.
You're absolutely right. Whenever we hear lone wolf attack, we all know that's not how things work. Just before I let you go, Mike, there's a story out today suggesting numbers of our federal politicians are using a very generous taxpayer-funded travel allowance to pay off properties they've bought in Canberra. So the idea is rather than spend a $322 a night allowance on a hotel when they're in Canberra, they're diverting those funds to pay off mortgages on properties they've bought in the national capital. According to the Daily Telegraph, there's 56 federal MPs and senators who own homes in Canberra, which is rather convenient. And why wouldn't you if you've got access to about 30 grand a year that can be used to pay off a home? So I know it's within the rules, but do you think most Australians in the middle of a housing crisis would view this as okay?
Yeah, look, the housing affordability situation is something that really burns a hole in the public. And when they see these sorts of arrangements, understandably, they get upset. And look, I never took advantage of this thing. It would have been heinous if I had have done because, I was living just outside Canberra. But, the thing is that, to take advantage of a scheme like that when you're getting paid pretty well compared to the average Australian really doesn't pass the sniff test, and it's a situation where we have to really have a good look at these rules and make sure that, yes, politicians need to be properly remunerated for a tough job and you want the best and brightest you can get. But, let's not have this sort of backdoor thing going on. We need to be upfront with the Australian public. And I think a lot of things need to be looked at again, as we've seen recently with the family reunion stuff, that also, I never was able to take advantage. I never wanted to take advantage of that. I just didn't think it was right.
You were there at the wrong time. You were there at the wrong time, Mike. All these things that you could have been a part of, you missed them by that much. Hey, I appreciate your time tonight. It's always great to talk with you, and more power to you for all of your efforts in terms of getting a Royal Commission off the ground. I really appreciate your work. Thanks so much.